Welcome to the OK Book Club. This is The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. Before you continue listening, the idea behind this podcast is to read first. You want to read chapters 17 through chapter 26, pages 114 through 184 before listening to this podcast. And I'll say this up front, we'll go chapter by chapter. This will be a shorter episode, but I will make the case that although somewhat frequently I would read quickly through the book, again, so much is not happening. But there's so many little gems, pearls, almost like vignettes, like just something you want to celebrate. And they just are simple, everyday moments in life with these characters out, certainly in extreme situations here during the war out in the countryside. They're put together not through their own wishes, although clearly Ada didn't want any part of being with her mother. But what you'll see is my argument that these are the type of books you want to read and celebrate because the author is able to turn in routine daily situations that occur, but yet we get a window into what is going on inside the minds of these three main characters. And it's mostly Jamie, Ada, and we learn it's Susan Smith. And she wants the children to call her Susan. And as I'm adjusting this microphone, getting ready to get into this episode, don't get old. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am. Some of you do know how old I am, but let's just say I'm getting old. All I did was bend over a little bit into the microphone, and this sharp pain goes through my back, and I scream. And thankfully, Jasper comes over, and he looks up at me. Dogs can sense anything. So a few breaths later, thankfully, I'm better. So as we get into chapter 17, a few things we learn. Number one, we learn that Miss Smith is angry with the kid's mother, ma'am, because she wasn't responding to her letters. And you also learn because of the war, so many different things are happening, and there was blackout regulations, which basically meant that they needed to turn off all the lights. No houses, buildings, shops, even buses or cars were supposed to show any sort of light outside after the sun went down. That way, if the Germans came to bomb at night, they wouldn't be able to see where the cities or villages were. It was harder to hit a dark place than a lit one. So they literally went around being very careful to go to sleep early, and they called putting up all the blackouts, which is very interesting. And again, horrible at the same time. As we head into the end of chapter 17, again, talk about just an amazing way to grab the reader, but just something horrible that you end up reading. As they go off to bed, it was Miss Smith, not me, who saw the welt on Jamie's wrist. A welt today could be something as simple as some type of redness, some type of bug bite, some type of rash. But unfortunately, what ended up happening was she was suspicious. This went along with Jamie being afraid about school all of a sudden, not wanting to go back. She literally walks into the school and charges into Jamie's classroom and confronts the teacher. This is what Mrs. Smith is saying. As it turns out, this teacher, right from the beginning, when she looked disdainfully at Ada, what a horrible person. Apparently, Jamie was left-handed, and she would be tying Jamie's wrist to the side of his chair, not letting him write left-handed, and because she thought it was the mark of the devil. Imagine this. So Miss Smith being the perfect mother, surrogate mother at this point, but a great role model, just comes in and basically chews out the teacher. Should have gotten the teacher fired, and certainly the teacher would have been fired today, but this is back in 1939. Reading this was just amazing, right through chapter 18, and that took up 5 pages, but it was captivating and truly suspenseful what happened. Chapter 19, they get identity cards, which is all about, believe it or not, if the Germans came in and took over, they would be able to identify the children. And in the process of doing this, Miss Smith learns that they don't know their dates of birth, and they just made up dates. Miss Smith ends up making up dates for the children. And as we go through these pages, we learn that Susan Smith, she's not happy. Something's up with her. Multiple times we learn that she sleeps in most of the morning. Ada needs to bring in her tea to her. She is complaining more out loud about her life, and she's not happy. We learn that her parents were not nice to her when she was younger. There's so much of a mystery here behind Miss Smith. How also is it that she is able to pay for everything when she doesn't work? Ada calls her out for not working. There's such a dynamic between the two, that the relationship is there that is so interesting between Ada and Miss Smith. In chapter 20, how about this? On page 137, how about something like this to ponder in terms of relationships and friends, right? So Maggie, again, she was the one that Ada had helped, and she's talking about her. And Stephen was the one that had helped Ada in terms of the piggybacking, getting her to the train to be evacuated. This is what Ada is saying to herself. I did want to count Maggie as a friend. I guess I wouldn't mind counting Stephen as one, only it was harder to be friends with someone who helped you than someone you'd helped. Think of that transactional nature of friendship that only Ada could have because she was shut in her whole life so far as a 10-year-old, didn't understand what friendship is all about, communicating is all about, having someone you can rely on. Just really interesting. And we can see the revolving nature of what Ada's going through, trying to accept love, but not accepting it. At the end of chapter 20, Jamie is becoming more affectionate with Miss Smith, and this is starting to bother Ada. This was after she basically rescued her from her school situation with using his left hand. And Miss Smith calls Ada over. Sit down. No, really, sit. And Ada is reticent to do this. And then she put her arm around me and pulled me halfway over. She did. I was almost on her lap. Listen to this line. You're so stiff, Miss Smith said. It's like trying to comfort a piece of wood. It felt very odd to have her touch me. Of course it made me tense, but I didn't go away inside my head. I sat on the sofa with Mrs. Smith's arm around me and Jamie breathing soft near my shoulder, and I watched the coal fire flicker, and I stayed right there in that room, and none of us moved for half an hour. Jamie fell asleep, and Miss Smith and I just sat, neither of us saying a word, until it was time to put the blackout up. And make tea. So for one of the few times I found myself, as I referenced in the beginning of the podcast, skipping, reading quickly. And this is chapter 21. Nothing is really happening. And basically we end up learning that the ponies' hooves were not properly taken care of. It's almost like, as they referenced it, I'm not clear on horses. I don't understand horses. I rode a horse once. But they're like fingernails, the pony's hooves, and you need to cut them. Otherwise, they can be very painful to the ponies. And this was something that was disturbing to Ada, and she kind of took it out on Miss Smith. And Miss Smith was apologetic. Again, going back to what a great person she is. And she said, teach me. Let me know what Mr. Grimes, who is the caretaker of Becky, the horse, Mr. Grimes had taught all of this to Ada. And Miss Smith said to Ada, please teach me so I can never do this again. And this is an insight into why Ada is so angry, at least at this particular moment, where she's actually saying things out loud that are not nice to Miss Smith. Just as Butter was mistreated, and I misspoke before, I apologize. I meant to say Butter, the pony, not Becky. Becky was the person that owned Butter. But nevertheless, it's almost as if Ada is angry because she was mistreated, and here is somebody else, Miss Smith, mistreating an animal who, just like Ada, could not advocate for herself, being so young and not knowing the difference with her clubfoot. Then as we enter chapter 23, we get some historical facts thrown in here into this novel about the Royal Oak Navy battleship being torpedoed by the Germans, and over 800 people had passed away out of the 1,200 men that were on this ship. And again, this was something that Ada had really been affected by and angry by. Another example of a little nugget that shows her anger, as if the men didn't have any control over this through outside forces, just like herself with her disability. And I want to pause here for a second just to talk about, very often I've tried to analyze what's happening that's not on the page, right? This is called inferring, which is making a smart guess. But concluding, having insights, thinking critically. Talk about a life skill. This is both for parents, adults, children. Listen, one of the biggest skill sets we can have is to be able to think critically, to problem solve. And how is it that you can develop this skill set, right? Having exposures to thinking. Practice your thinking, just like you want to hit a fastball, right? How are you going to do that? You got to practice swinging at fastballs. So if you want to practice, you want to be able to be good at thinking critically and solving problems, you've got to have exposures to thinking about something that's not that obvious. And throughout this, anytime I make a comment about what I'm thinking, I'm not always going to be right, but I try to back up what I'm thinking based on the evidence that's in the text, right? So much of this is going to be on standardized tests that you're going to see throughout your life, right through with my son, on his MCATs, which is getting into medical school, the SAT for medical school. More than half of the test was not actually on content having to do with medicine or biology. A lot of what was there on the test had to do with being able to think on the spot and reading through dense text. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget it. He told me that one of the passages that was really difficult was this passage on being on a desert island. And he had to navigate and figure out what the text was saying and come up with solutions to problems. So every time when we had this one quote that Ada said, but I didn't go away inside my head, right? Just don't dismiss that. Don't keep reading. Stop and think as to what that's actually trying to say, right? When we talked about the friends and how it was harder to be friends with somebody that helped you. Why is that? Again, sit there, ponder that, And again, I'm advocating for reading. It's obvious, but I just wanted to throw that in there. As we get into chapter 24, interesting piece of historical information that it's mentioned. Meanwhile, the war had become an endless stream of pamphlets the government sent through the mail. How to wear your gas mask, why to carry your gas mask, how not to get hit by a car in the blackout. When you carry a flashlight, do so by covering the glass with tissue paper so people will not again see you. You should paint curbs white so the people driving the cars could see them. You should be giving the government excess pots and pans to help build the planes that are needed to beat Hitler. And there were food shortages. England didn't have enough food to begin with. Generally speaking, they had to import a lot of their food. And there was rationing going on. Children rationing is basically cutting back on unnecessary resources, food, whatever it may be that could be used for the war effort. And this happened in our country during World War II. My father went through this and has told me stories about not having sugar, not having some of the pleasures in life that he was used to as a young kid. And we learned that a lot of the kids are going back to London now. There doesn't seem to be a lot happening in terms of the war, so a lot of people were more comfortable having their kids go back home. Jamie's teacher left too. And what's interesting on page 165, he talks about the fact that he got a new teacher and his new teacher didn't think he had the devil in him. She said so. She didn't care at all if he wrote with his left hand. And as this chapter wraps up, we get more insight into Susan, Miss Smith, and her past. She's asked to join some of the other ladies with Miss Lady Thornton, and she just says to herself, all these proper housewives, I don't fit in. I never have. And just as you get into chapter 25, again, I'm thinking nothing is happening, but OMG, our friend Ada breaks Susan Smith's sewing machine, and she flips out. She gets so upset by the consequences of what would happen in her own mind. She hides under the bed. She has a panic attack. It's just so painful to read through this. And what ends up happening? Of course, she was catastrophizing, which means she was just thinking the worst that was going to happen to her in her flashbacks of her previous life with her mother. And no, Miss Smith comes home and she even if it was horrible that the sewing machine was busted, you knew, and she said this out loud to Ada, that she wasn't going to get angry at her. And of course, it turned out that actually it was a minor incident with breaking the sewing machine. And we get this, we learn Jamie ends up bringing a ratty old cat, disgusting looking, as Miss Smith had mentioned, but Jamie insisted on keeping it, and he went right up, he bathed it, took care of it, and Jamie, again, you had to infer this, but Jamie fell asleep. He named this cat Bovril, curled in his arms. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Jamie had always wet the bed. Here he is almost going into kindergarten. He hasn't been able to control his bladder. But with the cat, he never wet the bed again. By the end of the second week, Susan was offering Bovril saucers of water milk, even though she didn't want it to begin with. It's worth it, she told me. Saves me washing all those sheets. That's how chapter 25 ends. And as we wrap up this episode, chapter 26, you know what's coming. And again, to pause this for a second, coming along with me on this journey, I don't know what's going to happen with this book. That's the fun of what I'm telling you every moment of these podcasts, every book, that I'm wondering as well as you are, will the mother ultimately come back for her kids? And you get a window into now this is what could be percolating inside Ada's head. She actually says at the bottom of page 183, and even if it felt like Ma'am hated me, she had to love me, didn't she? She had to love me because she was my ma'am. And Susan was just somebody who got stuck taking care of Jamie and me because of the war. She's going over and over her head, the good things about being with Miss Smith, the bad things about being with Smith, and then she tries to reconcile. Reconcile, friends, means put a positive spin on something that's not good. She's thinking about some of the few times where things were good at home. So, again, come with me on this journey. This has been episode 2 of Book 3, The War That Saved My Life. Happy reading, my friends.